A doctor in isolation treats only a limited number of patients. But all those drugs in the market reaches out to billions of. So unless they are safe, if they can't be taken. So pharmacovigilance is one of those branches which actually lets those drugs in the market only which are safe for use for people. Now we would never be having this corona vaccine unless clinical trials were in. 10,000 patients we have one doctor. For 1,000 patients we have half bed. Most of the middle class education at a private medical college is out of town. One person has paid 3 crores, 2 crores for UG and PG. You hardly expect them to be very charitable. They also need a return on investment for their.
Welcome viewers, I am Alankar Srivastav and this is Middle Class Hub, India's first platform exclusively for the middle class. Viewers, as you all know, the whole world is going through a crisis, a health crisis like never seen before. No country on this planet is untouched by this, the magnitude of this crisis. And as with any other, situations arising of this proportion, we are living in a social media age. There's a lot of misinformation that is being peddled as substitute of genuine medical advice. So what we at Middle Class have always believed that misinformation is as deadly as coronavirus pandemic or any other disease for that matter. Now, over the last year and so, there are some terms that have been added to our everyday lexicon, like clinical trial. So there's a lot of confusion on that. What exactly is a clinical trial? Even when we talk about this thing in the context of coronavirus, because it has become part of everyday conversation, clinical trial, there are several myths associated with it. Now, if I tell you that normally a medical aspirant who chose to become a doctor, no doubt they have significant impact on the number of patients that they treat throughout their life. But then there is a limit to that. The point I'm trying to make is, are you aware of a stream in medical education, in medical profession, wherein the kind of impact you are making on the patients, that's huge. That maybe, one doctor might take, say, 1,000 lives to create that kind of impact. Confused? Okay, so here I'll present to you Dr. Nishit Kumar. Before I introduce him, I'll tell you that he was among the top 0.02%. He figured in that list in the All India PMT. He graduated from one of India's premier medical institutions, King Edward Medical College, Mumbai. And he made a mark for himself in pharmacovigilance sector. So what it is and what all the work that his profile constitutes, we'll talk at length with him and get to understand and open this huge opportunity, what all exists in this field to several of aspirants out there. Because I know, like many of us, many of you also would not be aware that a career, a profession can be made in this stream also, and you can have significant impact, way more than any practicing doctor can ever make in his entire life, in his or her entire life. Now, Dr. Nishit Kumar is working as a manager drug safety physician with Paraxel International. It's a Fortune 1000 MNC, and they are into pharmacovigilance sector. So we'll talk to Dr. Kumar and try to understand and get a perspective of the current situation and of course about his field. So Dr. Nishit Kumar, thank you so much for joining Middle Class Hub. We are glad to have you, sir.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure for me, and thank you.
So, Doctor, let me first begin by asking you, what made you choose this unusual, I would rather, if for want of a better word, career path? Like you went into a clinical trial. So, what the field is all about, and what's the kind of work that it involves, and how important it is? I would like you to explain in simple terms to our viewers who are watching.
Yeah. So we start with the kind of very interesting question. Obviously, this is the most often asked question with me because usually the doctors that general people population encounters is all we see in hospitals with stethoscope and all. So yeah, but then I'll just start with a little brief background with why I went in here, and then we will just get on to it. So what happened that when you get into the medical college, it's a very at the age of around 18, you are teen, you don't realize the significance of you are just cleared an exam, you are on a high, you have gotten what millions of people dream of, you get the good fortune, you just go in, and it's a wonderland. Medical, when you just go in, so you are just taking it everything. At that time, you don't really realize. Now, when you start with, then you suddenly lot of opportunities are thrown at you. From in medicine, there is surgery, there is ortho, there is pediatric, there is OBG, or gynec, radio, and all the branches have their different merits and merits. So basically, at that point of time, you don't really realize what exactly you want. But as you go through, even by the end of it, most of us are none the wiser. But what happened with me was I was a little too sensitive for this direct patient to patient contact. I am little sensitive person at heart. Little, I still get bothered with blood and all. Doing those minor procedures, even like you have to do that stitches also. So I was just at that time, but the beauty of our profession is there are a lot of avenues for people who really don't want to be into the clinical field. Like, obviously, why most of people who go to the medical field, even when I also went, I wanted to be a clinician. But when 100 people go, obviously 5, 10 people you will always find who somehow get either disenchanted not in the way this it's not their kind of doesn't become preference at the end of it. At the start, everyone has the same. But our field is so varied, and especially drug safety, I will come to it in a little while. So the thing is that you realize that you can actually go into research fields, non-clinical fields, and it make an equally significant impact there. So because I knew that I would do much better in a field that I would be comfortable in. So that's why I chose not to go into a not to into a hardcore clinical side and wanted to go into a non-clinical side. But when I started exploring this opportunity, this really came in a very nice way. So again, see, my entrance into the field was a very conventional. My father was a doctor, and just so it was kind of taken that I would be a doctor. So right time, right place, studied well at the right time, got in. But then you create your own journey. So I started with that. Then I found out that, okay, there was a conference I attended of pharmacovigilance. So then I really found out that this is a really interesting. In fact, to all of our viewers who are listening, I would like to say people who actually are medicals, this advice I would give to medicals because obviously if any aspirant is saying, and if someone wants to become a doctor, I would still say that clinical side is the best to do. No disclaimers there. Obviously, if one actually becomes, in fact, most of 95% of my batchmates are actually into treating patients. But this particular advice I'm giving is only for all of our viewers who are actually into a medical college now. and somehow don't actually feel that they will carry on. They don't necessarily want to carry on being into a clinical practice. For them, I would like to say that pharmacovigilance is an exceptionally good, really, really good option. It gives you a comfortable life, a corporate job, a 9 to 5 job, weekends off. The doctors, especially all of my friends, when we talk about, so obviously they are getting a lot of job satisfaction from patient treatment, but they don't have those kind of lives. Like obviously they are strung 24/7 jobs now, especially in COVID situation. So for those 5% of people who are into medicine and want to select an alternate career, this is a really, really good chance. And it actually, it's good in way that you actually, now let's go into what it actually entails. Now, in day-to-day life, every one of us is eating a lot of drugs for whatever reason, either we or our parents or everyone. Now, all the drugs that you in the market, they are in the market only because their benefit is better than theirs. So pharmacovigilance entails and ensures that the drugs you are taking is safe for you. That's why when you were saying that thing resonates, like again, a doctor in isolation treats only a limited number of patients. But all those drugs in the market reaches out to billions of people. So unless they are safe, if they can't be taken. So pharmacovigilance is one of those branches which actually lets those drugs in the market only which are safe for use for people. So clinical trials is a little different from what we do. We will cover this up in the importance of clinical trial. We are not exactly into the conducting of clinical trials. We are mainly into the safety of all the drugs that are either in clinical trials or into the marketing. But yeah, because of pharmacovigilance, all of us can be rest assured that the drugs that we are taking will do us more good than. So that's why it's important. And for all, again, medical aspirants, again, actual doctors, if you really want to have an alternate career, this is a really good one, including lifestyle, decent. It affords you a decent lifestyle. It gives you a good work-life balance. So you can consider it. But again, for all doctors, ideally, being a doctor myself, ideally, you should go into clinical.
You rightly pointed out, to each his own. And if somebody is interested, of course, they would go to, go ahead in the field of treating patients into practice. But the work you do, it has a,
yeah, exactly. In fact, most of it.
Yes, please carry on. You were saying something.
Yeah, I'm just saying that actually most of people should go. But for those people who choose not to go, this is one option they can definitely yes. That was just mine. Yeah, carry. Sorry.
Yeah. And I would say, the kind of impact, as I made in my initial remark, it's huge compared to a doctor practicing in isolation, of course. So that we very well, the viewers, especially those medical aspirants, the young ones, young doctors, they would be really interested to know more about this pharmacovigilance sector and try to figure out if their aptitude matches the demand of this industry. And of course, the importance can't be stated in words, because the drugs that we take, of course, there are always kind of apprehensions, concerns. After a lot of checks, balances, they are introduced into the market. So, and a lot of work goes behind it, thanks to professionals like you. Now, Doctor, there is this misconception, I would rather say, which I would like you to debunk all those myths floating around. I know it's not directly related to your work, but you are, of course, efficient enough to talk about it. When it comes to clinical trial, and more in the case of this coronavirus pandemic, ever since the pandemic has hit us, so many people, they call us, and they have this concern, like when it comes to clinical trials, they want to know about it. I can just list some of the concerns that have come to us from our viewers, like when you are part of a clinical trial, basically you become a guinea pig. So that's what it is. And then mostly some people have this concern that it's like sharing your personal health history with someone, which maybe otherwise you would not have done had you not been part of the clinical trial. So how do you address these concerns? And if you could help us understand clearly what all involves a clinical trial.
Yeah. Now let's first start with the importance of the clinical trial. All the like let's get now because we are in a COVID situation and everyone is like the one thing at present which is has its values in diamond and gold is the corona vaccine, right? Now we would never be having this corona vaccine unless clinical trials were implemented. Me, you, if at all we are thinking of getting a corona vaccine, you don't know if how would you know if it's effective or not unless it goes through all the stages of the clinical. I'm just dissecting your question into two parts. Why clinical trials
Sure.
are important? Any drug, any or every drug you are taking or we are taking, including all the life-saving drugs, none of these drugs would come into the market without a clinical trial. So, especially this is very much highlighted when we are talking about corona and directly in the forefront of the corona vaccine. All these vaccines you are able to avail because someone chose to go into a clinical trial. We had volunteers for these clinical trials. So actually the people who have volunteered are the reason why most of us will be safe in future. So this is a very huge impact. And in fact, right from a paracetamol to the drugs which cure your cancer, none of these drugs can come into the market without a proper clinical trial. So this is just to emphasize the importance of clinical trial. So it's an absolutely must thing first. Now coming to the myths around it, where like now the clinical trials of today, they are not like very random things. Obviously one can think like that, obviously we are being used and everything, but this is not the way because again we are in the zone, we know how all of this is done. So this is a very painstaking process. Before going into a clinical trial, a lot of scientific evidences are collected. A very painstakingly clinical trial designs are put in place. There is a very strong regulation here. They called good clinical practices. All of these have to be strongly adhered to. All the patients that are all the volunteers, patients, whoever are involved in this, they are actually have a very well informed consent. They are clearly told that these are the risks and these are the benefits that we actually think would be. All these clinical trials are done within with a medical supervision. So it's not that if anything happens, people are left high and dry. And the thing is, none of it is like forced. Again, for the benefit of all the audience, I would like to say that no one can force anyone to attend the clinical trial. So it's a voluntary. And it again, there is a review board which actually conducts a review of the whole design. So this is a very safe. This is a very well planned thing. More than safe, I would say well planned. Now, if you will ask me if it's 100% safe or not, obviously no one can guarantee you that. Even the medicine we are taking, even the COVID vaccine, I have taken the vaccine. I would have like 2 days of chills. A lot of my friends have had fever. So obviously no drug can be 100% safe. So it definitely cannot be guaranteed, but what I can say is that a lot of safety and the entire clinical trial is based on patient safety. Taking the first thing importance is patients, the people, and their clinical trials also have a lot of different kind of advantages. There are two kind of clinical trials. One we are seeing for COVID vaccine. The people who actually went into the trial, there is another aspect of it. Now, these people actually got a vaccine much before you and I got. So, obviously, even as a point of trial, but in that way, you can see that actually they were the initial beneficiaries of it. So, obviously, before it comes in, so that it in a different kind of way, it's advantageous. Now, when we are treating patients with extremely debilitating, like terminal cancers, and we are going for palliative therapies and the trial. Now, they are, when we hear of these, they are miracle drugs and everything, which have really so much effectiveness. How do we test the effectiveness? So when these trials are done on these terminal patients, they actually get access to those medicines during the trial, which they will normally won't get until those trials are conducted and actually come into the market. But then the lifespan of that person may not necessarily be that long. So that those persons who go into trial actually get the benefit of getting those medicines even in the trial phase. So there are a lot of advantages also associated with it. So guinea pig and all that is again a public perception. If in fact, even now, what I keep hearing now, being a doctor, obviously you want to know in our rural places, people are not taking vaccines. In urban areas, people are hankering for vaccines and not getting. In rural places, government is giving them vaccine, and people, because of these myths, spreads, okay, because they hear this person took and something happened to entire villages are not. We have heard of such instances also. So at one place where educated people actually lining up, putting their thing on this COVID, when will I get my vaccine? There are people who are getting the vaccine and not taking it. So again, this myth is only because people don't know what goes behind these trials. But again, I would like to say that these trials are conducted in a very systematic way. A lot of studies, lot of research, lot of painstaking work goes on. All of these is actually done under a supervision. This thing has to pass through a lot of courts, and it's very professional. So definitely there is nothing to fear, and it brings up results for people who are into it and also for the entire mankind. So again, really I would thank all those people who volunteer, who go to volunteer, because all of us ultimately are the ultimate beneficiaries. But I would definitely say that clinical trials is nothing.
Thank you so much for addressing all those concerns, because as you rightly pointed out, this is a very significant first step in ensuring that the drugs get to the market in a commercial way and is available for common people. So thanks for addressing all those concerns raised by our viewers. And now, Doctor, the one question, the overriding concern, I would say, that is crossing everyone's mind is, we in India, we are yet not over the second wave of coronavirus. There is, all medical experts are suggesting that there is a very strong likelihood of a third wave, which can be very, I would say, harmful for kids. So I want your expert opinion on that. Do you see that a third wave will, if at all, if it happens, it will be more dangerous for kids or children?
Today only, I think there was a press release from the government of India that third wave is very likely to happen. Again, because even second was not forecasted as such. After the first wave, went second wave. But then what is happening with the second wave? Second wave, when it has come, has actually been much more severe than the first wave. First wave, nation's count did not go above 2 lakhs. I think with the second wave, every day we were reaching cases more than 4 lakhs a day. Now it has started going into a little decline, but still the death rates have not decreased. And now we are getting new kind of challenges. First wave, you had never heard of this black fungus, which is now seen in very much with this second wave. Again, a lot of it has been attributed to misuse of steroids for this treatment of the corona. But again, there are a lot of things that are actually coming in. So why the experts think there would be a third wave? The experts think there would be a third wave because again there are a lot of strains which still would it's thought that they would manage to survive this second wave and would come back later. And this thing has more been like, has become more stronger with the coming of the second. Regarding the kids getting, the kids have this naturally strong immunity. Means, so obviously in first wave you had hardly seen any kids. Means first wave was not about kids at all, almost nil. Second wave has had some kind of impact on kids, but you would still the all the kind of fatalities and all the kind of things you are hearing, it's very less reported. Means the severity kids have been affected, and there would be some isolated fatalities for sure. But in general, the ultimate worst outcome is usually not seen or heard with the kids, even with the second wave, other than they were affected this time. Now, with the third wave, what is happening, or why it's generally being thought that the kids would be affected? Because again, after this, in between the second and third wave, most of the population who are not kids would be getting vaccinated, right? So already we have had most of 45 plus vaccinations done, and the projected time that they are thinking of the third wave will, let's say, next 6 months. The kind of way it's going on, the vaccination is going on, a significant population of adults would be vaccinated by. Now, vaccinations may not completely prevent you from the infection, obviously, but obviously with vaccination, it has been seen that the severity generally is reduced significantly. Second wave, actually the first wave had a lot of people who had got vaccinated. So second we are hearing that the older people are not always getting the worst of it, and a lot of young people have been coming out with significant complications. So again, one thing again, because we are here, so and for the benefit of viewers, I would seriously and as a medical professional say that don't have any kind of aspersions regarding vaccination. Go ahead, and I'm taking a detour because it's a very important thing. So please, whenever given a chance, please go and take the vaccine, because getting vaccinated is the thing that will save you from anything. So please, anyone, even if you have aspersion, believe me, not getting vaccinated is far worse than getting vaccinated. It's obviously getting vaccinated is not, but even if you are in some kind of confusion, please don't think twice. Get vaccinated as soon as possible. So again, so coming to the why the children would be affected, again because they would be the people who would not have been vaccinated projectedly by the time the third wave will come. Though now there is a trial going on at 3 centers, AIIMS, Patna, AIIMS, and there are few centers where they are trying this trial for between 2 to 18 years, and they are seeing the feasibility of how soon it can be given to the kids. But mainly the region that is thought of that it would be more seen in kids would be this. The region is basically this. But then I would say that again, all these are conjunctures that this will have a severity in kids, and because there is again nothing very scientific to say that kids would be more affected by this, especially in terms of symptoms and the outcome of the disease. So yeah, there is a scope that maybe the third wave would involve more number of kids, could involve, hopefully they will not, but it's not necessary that there repercussions to this. So, yeah, but then if let's say before the third wave, if at all comes, there is still a possibility it may not come. But if it comes, if we could manage to get kids also vaccinated, then it will be good for everyone. Let's see how it goes.
Doctor, as you were saying, vaccination is the mantra. I mean, everyone, irrespective of their apprehension, concerns, once they get a chance, they should go for vaccination, isn't it?
Definitely. And the biggest proof is that you see all the medical professionals who are in the maximum know-how. You will never see any doctor not going. They are, in fact, first line of vaccinations done are for healthcare professionals. And I have never heard of this. Being a part of medical community, I am in touch with lot of doctors. I've never heard of a single instance where a doctor has refused the chance of getting it. So if people who are in the maximum know-how do feel that this is the best way to go, because it's again their technical line of thing. So I don't think there should be any aspersions for the general public.
Thank you, doctor, for making that point, because that
is a very significant thing. I don't want any kind of misinformation to lead to any less vaccine. Because again, it's a hard thing. If your neighbor is not getting vaccinated, that is ultimately boiling down to your risk. So overall, the entire community as a joint has to get vaccinated to break this chain.
And if I ask you, in the context of the second wave that has hit us so badly in the middle of April, in your opinion, where do you think we have gone wrong? Like, is it that we have gone too complacent, or what, COVID fatigue setting in? And I'm talking about not just at the government level, common people across, sectors, people getting more complacent. Is that that is responsible for this huge surge that we have seen?
Obviously, see, actually, now it's very easy to blame the government for it. Again, I'm not a very pro-government or anti-government thing, but we have to realize that Corona is an extraordinary situation. No government can by default be very prepared to handle anything of such proportions. First wave was very successfully controlled. Second wave, no one really foresee. Now everyone is saying that, okay, there was what actually when first wave actually was in a dip. No one was actually talking about a second wave coming. So second wave coming was really not that kind of a foresight. Obviously, when it happened, and maybe the agency should have been well prepared, but you cannot prepare for something which is actually, in India, healthcare is still the kind of population we have. For 10,000 patients, we have one doctor. For 1,000 patients, we have half bed. So healthcare in India, while at a nascent stage, means the kind of population we have, it's really not equipped. Otherwise, like most of the wide developed countries have a lot population and lot of infrastructure. Even if we have certain kind of infrastructure, it gets lost into the kind of population matrix we have. So again, I'm not saying that definitely there would have been fault, but then I'm not no one to say it, because I'm really not in a position of how it could have been handled better. But I do know that there are a lot of medical challenges involved. And regarding the people, you see, the worst thing is that, the kind of, they say that this has brought out the worst traits. You see a lot of good Samaritans, but still, every time I see that the remdesivir being hoarded at such black rates, oxygen cylinders deliberately being sold in black, and so on. So people are actually, when you see people, this is only, I just talking about one aspect of it, that people are actually trying to make a money out of other people. So it's okay if someone dies and they get money. So the kind of apathy you see, and it's not a one thing. It's happening pan-India and happening at a very long scale and a very large scale. So, but that is again coming to the treatment maladies. Now, why this happened? Actually, even if you have to being again a medical professional, again, I see a lot of my people, because this is comes under essential services. So a lot of my friends actually have to go out and treat the patient. And a lot of them come with this feedback that on roads, there are still people careless. Now I'm talking about the time when we are in lockdown in most of the cases. I'm currently staying in Patna and we are in lockdown, and we have not seen, you see that people still, we get, again, I don't go out, but I've seen paper clippings of people in the market still hoarding. Then there was this thing that Delhi, the day lockdown was announced, there was this mile-long line before a liquor shop or whatever. Point being, then people themselves are not actually really. And now when this has actually gone high, there was a phase when it had actually gone down and wave one was almost in decline. You see, people had really forgotten about. At that time, people were really moving without masks, though everyone was shouting, "Please go with mask, please go with mask." Even now, you hear that people are having these marriages and processions with large number of people with, and then they are used to hear of this 100 Baratis going COVID positive. So again, the fault definitely doesn't lie at one. We have to admit that people also have taken it not that seriously in the way they should have taken. Even when the second wave actually started, even then, if like suppose we had a lockdown kind of situation right at the start of when the second wave started, or if people had showed some kind of self-restraint at that, I'm pretty sure the condition would not have been as worse. About the rest of the things, lack of healthcare, lack of oxygen, lack of remdesivir, these things really can't be there. Partly because we do not have an infrastructure, partly because people are indulging in malpractices. If it reaches that scale, this has to happen. But yeah, not all of it is created necessarily by the authority. Most of it is created because of personal lack of responsibility, I would say.
I'm very glad you mentioned about the state of healthcare infrastructure in our country. I mean, no one can doubt that it leaves a lot to be desired. Over the last 70 years, a lot more could have been done. And of course, these things can't be ramped up in overnight, but still, there is a scope for much improvement when it comes to healthcare infrastructure. Also, I would like to get your views on the lack of medical professionals. There is an acute and huge shortage of doctors and nurses across the country. So this gap,
Yeah,
how do
like
you
I
see? Please.
now again, just like I pointed out that there for every one doctor we have more than 10,000. So this gap is existing only largely because we have too less number of doctors. Means if we compare the overall population, we have doctors, let's say in millions hardly. So which for a population of a billion, it's really, really very less. So again, a medical system needs an overhaul. Medical education, like I am a big advocate of a medical education. Like when I was just started with the interview, I told you that I have seen all the fruits of it. Like all of my friends really well settled. I see children of my friends. I see again my relatives who are going into medicine. Medicine still now remains one of the best career paths. It's still one of the most cherished. Means practically half of India very secretly dreams that our children could become a doctor. And it's not without. It's still one of the most rewarding professions where not only you get the perks, you also get a lot of respect and you visibly create a lot of difference in a life. But again, unfortunately, the way the country has progressed, the medical profession hasn't progressed. With the kind of leap and bound population explosion, the number of doctors we still have is very, very. And I am more talking about doctors who get to mostly in government setups. Private setups is now out of bounds from normal. I think the fees of a normal private colleges over 5 years goes to close to 1 crore rupees for a medical profession, medical education. So basically, that means it becomes out of bound for mostly 90%. There are two challenges here. One, we have very limited seats in the government colleges. Second, the kind of, again, not all colleges. Private colleges have also different kind of system. There are some really good private colleges and there are some really average private colleges, where getting in is not necessarily how good and meritorious you are. It's mainly how much money you have in your hand. Now, the problem with this is that this field is a very demanding field. It requires you to earn a lot of skills. At the end of the day, one person is dying and you have to show your skills, intellect to save that person. So after some level, if the quality of education is not up to that mark, then maybe you would still go to the doctor and maybe you will not still get the quality health care. So government setup, we have very less seats. Quality private setups, we have few seats. Most of the seats, though even with still that data, we have still this 1 in 10,000 thing. And again, if you were really that good, maybe you would have cracked the competition. So people who have not been able to crack, again, I'm not being very generic here. I am talking from what I see as a medical professional, and I have a lot of respect to all the people who have gone into the thing. But I'm talking as a from the general population. That again, how much of a quality health care we are really able to provide. That also comes to the point from where how much of a quality institutions we are able to get our medical profession. Medical field is a very good thing, but like I was just saying, like the year I went in, 1,60,000 people appeared at that time for medical exam. There were 1,60,000 registrations. If you didn't get in top 2,500, you would get dental or you would not get anything at all. So that was the kind of competition. Now our seats have increased to like from those 25 people get medical at around 8-10,000 also. But then that 1.6 lakh has increased to now 20 lakhs or something like that. So aspirants are lot, seats are very less. So maybe I think one of the things that is actually needed to significantly increase the number of seats. Because again, I'm really talking about those seats which middle class can afford. And since we are talking at middle class, I would still really say for most of the middle class, education at a private medical college is out of bound and not always practical. Because ultimately, how much you will have to spend a lot for UG. Then if you could not maybe compete for UG, it's not necessary you will compete in PG exams. Then you will have to go again that for post-graduation. And then again, you do not know. One malpractice leads to another. If one person has paid 3 crores, 2 crores for UG and PG, you hardly expect them to be very charitable. They also need a return on investment for theirs. Then obviously different kind of means may come. So again, there's a lot of challenges with the medical education which persists. So again, the only way is to increase a lot of number of seats, increase a lot of quality medical colleges, increase the number of doctors, somehow spread. A lot of doctors actually go abroad in search of better opportunities. Fair enough for them to each them own, but then we should create those kind of atmospheres in our country where we could retain maximum resources there, so that we can have a quality healthcare system. Even if you have an infrastructure, if you don't have doctors, it will not succeed. So yeah, it's a big burning issue, and actually I would request government to do something.
You stated a fact that today medical education is out of bound of the middle class because it's so expensive. I would refer to this very interesting conversation with Dr. Devi Shetty, renowned one of the prominent doctors of our country. What he said that
Yeah, yeah, of course.
yeah,
Everyone knows
so
them. Yeah.
Dr. Shetty was saying, he was making an interesting point that when they were like in their teenage years, when they were medical aspirants, so that time mostly the doctors, they would come from middle class, from working class families, right? And he also made a very pertinent point, not to discredit other sections, but that the magic in the fingers of doctors. Because see, ultimately at the end of the day, as you mentioned, a patient's life is not saved by the degrees that you hold. It's ultimately comes down to the skill of that doctor, isn't it? And the kind of passion you have for your profession.
Of course.
Now, in today's time, Dr. Shetty, I'm just quoting him. Dr. Shetty said that most of the good doctors, when you say doctors, you mean actually the good ones of them who have this so-called passion and magic in their fingers that they can cure and treat patients more effectively compared to maybe other medical professionals. They come from the working class, they come from the middle class. But because, as you mentioned, that a medical education would cost someone more than a crore plus. Now, for a middle class population in our country, for working class families, it's huge. So at the end of the day, even if you are very passionate about your, aspirations of joining the healthcare industry, maybe you'll have to look for some other options, because so ultimately, then this question was asked to Dr. Shetty that, so what's the option? You said, okay, increase the number of seats. I am saying double the GDP, percentage of GDP that right now we allocate to healthcare sector, double it. So his response was, see, money can't solve every problem, right? You throw money at a sector, money has this tendency of utilizing itself unless and until you revamp the entire medical education. So now I want your expert views on that. What, in your opinion, is the current medical education, the challenges that you see, and your suggestions to make it better from what it is right now?
See, again, see, a very nice point you created regarding passion. See, I would just say that people, the people you are saying that who are really passionate come from the middle class. You know why they come from the middle class? Because if you really are going into these kind of colleges that I am discussing, the top quality colleges, you are getting a rank of, let's say, you are in top 1%, top half percent of the population. Obviously, you are there because you have had a plan. It cannot be only intellect. A lot of passion, a lot of hard work goes into getting there to be in the absolute top of the iceberg. Again, for those people who are willing to spend crores for their those education, there could be some passionate ones, but again, I would say most of them, if they had those requisite passion, they would have either been able to translate that passion and got into their, or then again their passion or not passion comes from economic return. See, the moment you spend that kind of amount into a something, even if you are able to sustain, then you won't do it with passion. You will do it with the kind of, the first thing is, okay, I will, if you actually go over budget beyond your means, there has to be some kind of ROI, only then you will spend those kind of money. Then obviously your prime aim of becoming a doctor would become wrong in the first. Why you want to become a doctor? A person who is spending 1 crore won't become a doctor to treat poor people or to do charity. The point being, it starts with one thing. It starts with lack of passion. Maybe that's why you are not in that first half of people, those select people who got in there. Then you are very well able to spend those kind of money. Then you will definitely spend because you want return. The moment you are thinking of returns in that magnitude, that moment, all the passion and all those the kind of nobilities associated with this field go for a toss. So it's like a chain. If the initial input is of a different kind, then all the things, the ingredients you overall put will get into a final product which will be totally different here also. Regarding the medical education, I would say that the only, again, for medical aspirants, I would say, again, I'm just saying this for any young children that are actually listening to us, or parents who have young children who are preparing for it. There is a particular 2 year period, 11th and 12th. And it's very easy to be on this point and say that, okay. But I am just saying this only because I have gone through it, and luckily because I was able to do correct things at those correct times, that has shaped my life, and will be reaping these benefits all throughout my life. So for those periods, for that crucial period of 10 plus 2, I would really want children, parents, make sure your children really give it care. Those 2 years, if you are managed to actually do something, that will shape your future. And if you manage something, you will reap the benefits. If you not, you will be forced to regret all your. I know today is a very dynamic world, and I'm not saying only about this medical thing. I'm saying people who are working for IITs, IAS, whatever. Now there are a lot of career options, but remember that is the time of like really. We have so much talent in India. We have so much competition in India. And again, I'm not pushing people into going into unhealthily putting pressure on their children. But make sure that they are on their right path, and just make sure they be the best of what they do. At the end of it, there should be no regret that I could have done this, but I could not. Just ensure that whatever were the capabilities of you or your children, you have ensured that they have done that, so that the whole future of theirs depends on that, and whatever they do at this point will shape their entire future. This is just about the kind of, especially now, because now I see there are a lot of online things. When we were studying, we used to feed off a lot of our like people who were co-preparing with us. So we had a lot of like, when you see 5 people studying with you, you automatically get that thing again. Or if you see that you are grasping this thing better than someone, or if someone else is grasping this thing better than you, then you could go and see where are your gaps. You can ask help from them. So there are a lot of things that somehow currently these people are not able to get, but that still should not deter you. It's all in our hand to make our career, shape career. So even if because see, again, it's a competition. If these things are not available to you, these things are not available to anyone. So everyone at present is still on the equal footing, still with all the advantages and all the disadvantages. So please, and also one thing, Alankar, I would like to say that there was this myth I used to see when I went into a medical, AEM being one of the best medical colleges of India. And you need a rank of like, if you get a rank more than 400 all India, you won't get it. There, when I went, I see people like from really ordinary background. Like, I am still a son of a doctor. I saw people like from farmers and clerks and. But yeah, I'm just saying that your background will never be a reason for you not achieving in life. We see a lot of people of like really poor family going up. So one thing that some people that I did not have the means and I could not rise in life. Medical college, my fee was like how much? 4,000 per year. Even now, medical education, when I'm talking about so high, most of the medical colleges still have fee like per year. Their fee is less than a school that is taking for your class one child in there. The entire medical in setups. So I'm just saying that preparing for any exam, getting into it is really not a byproduct of where you come. It's entirely in your hand. And if you are really very industrious, dedicated, then your background will never be a roadblock in your success. So there is, because I've been through a lot of, and when you study at a good place, not the one advantage you get to meet a lot of achievers, and your perspective changes, and you see how they achieve. So indeed, actually, you go into any of those IITs, even the professors go in cycle now also. So because don't have these hang-ups, they don't have these things, and they know the only nothing is a substitute for success other than hard work. The only thing that will lead you to success is hard work. I just wanted this because again I wanted, because we are discussing on a middle class stuff, so I do want to touch a few topics that will be pertinent to middle class. Coming to medical education per se, if you see, when I go into a medical college, I don't find any gaps really. At least because when I was into a medical college, and that was a very academically oriented college, so I think it preps you well. But then again, I'm talking about the different kind of colleges. I do not know what kind of, when we take the entire spectrum or government and private colleges. So what you can maximum do is you can regulate the curriculum, but what kind of teachers they have, what kind of facilities they have at in state level, no one can really control. So medical education per se, personally, there could be gaps, but personally, I don't feel when you go into a medical system and being a doctor, I personally don't necessarily feel there is a lot of defects there. Means from where I graduated, I saw everything was very good. I again don't have experience of actually going into other ideas, but basically I would say curriculum is good, but how it is implemented by colleges at end stage level would matter it all. But nothing revolutionary can really be done there, is what again there could be lot of opinions, but this is for my.
I think, Dr. Kumar, I can tell you one thing. You've been there, done that. So listening to this conversation would be a huge source of motivation and a lot of learning many youngsters will take from this conversation. Dr. Kumar, I thank you so much for your time, for speaking to Middle Class Hub and sharing your expert opinion on whole range of issues, ranging from the health infrastructure to the medical education, the crisis that we are in. And you have also shown us a way ahead that the mantra is to go and get vaccinated. And of course, in the long run, as you rightly mentioned, medical education, increasing the number of seats in colleges, those are some crucial areas that the policymakers must look into and make sure that it's implemented. Because one challenge that we have seen as a nation over the last 70 years is we are very good with making policies, but when it comes to execution, implementation, that leaves a lot of scope that can be improved upon. As Dr. Shetty informed that he didn't name the state government, but for the last 5 years, he has been struggling to get a license to open a nursing college so that he could train from the rural areas, nurses over there. So these are the kind of problems, because see, if the demand, is huge, but the supply is not that much, then of course you would see this huge commercialization, and we are talking about fees in excess of 1 crore. So, and ultimately, as you made a very strong and pertinent point, that someone spending 1 crore on getting a medical degree won't be interested in treating poor or marginalized people who can't bear that huge fees. So these are some challenges which I'm sure will take all these points to those who sit in the corridors of power, and will see to it that more considered opinion, must be shot on these lines, so that next time, God forbid, if a pandemic strikes, we are better prepared. So thank you, Dr. Nishit, for talking to us. We wish you all the best for your work that you are doing, and all the best, Doctor.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. As a last point, when you just said, Dr. Sethi, I think one more thing that could be done actually is that, see, why would Dr. Shetty be having challenges with those policies? It could be because the people he has to deal with while getting those licenses may not be from the medical field. I would definitely recommend that all the people who are making medical related policies, or in whose hands there is these policy related to medical colleges, medical things, or getting a license, unless they are doctors, they will never appreciate those grassroots levels. I mean, if Dr. Shetty was trying to do something for the benefit of society, I'm pretty sure if we had competent medical people there, they would definitely have been much more receptive of the ideas that why he is looking at what would be the immediate benefits of this. So again, if actually talking generally of improvement, because this is again the entire with the entire COVID thing, we do realize that medical sector is one thing where we need doctors to be at the front of all the decisions, because ultimately nothing really affects us as much as this thing. And in any future pandemic, if we want to be ready, how? Because unless the doctors, unless the medical community is the chief policy makers, then really otherwise, so even at minor level, even at all levels, unless at administrative level, for medical field we have doctors, I really don't think other people would be able to appreciate it in you. Again, this just came out of your Dr. Shetty's point, so just as a parting thought, I wanted to put in this thing. But yeah, I am really thankful to boy, and it was very cathartic conversation for me also, so that I could contribute whatever to the middle class of, and really thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much.